Letters to Jude. I'm looking at my mother through a window in the act of dying. She is lifting a cup of tea to her lips. The flash of lightning strikes and kills her. As the lightning strikes her, it registers her picture instantaneously on the pane of glass. The lightning passes through a tree outside, the passing of her soul, and burns the tree down. My dear Leo, I hope you don't mind my writing to you after such a long time, but my thoughts of you never faded. I just had to write when I heard of the sudden death of your mother. It must have been a dreadful blow. I knew how close you were to her. Freddie Crichton conveyed the news. He had my phone number from when I au paired for him of my parents' home in Sevilla. When he called, I was polite to him, but I didn't tell him much of my business. He hinted at the terrible ordeal we suffered that night in his house. He was trying to get me to describe it as if he wanted me to relive the trauma inflicted on us by those creatures. He called them dogs. You know, the way the dogs do it, he said, making me feel most uncomfortable. I asked him, did they ever catch the assailants? He said, what would be the point of that? You know, the cops here never catch anyone. They just spend their time asking the public to solve their crimes. It was he who suggested I write to you. He seemed so concerned. Friends that go back the furthest, he said. But I never knew you two were close. In fact, I would have thought the opposite. Anyway, age can mellow people, and maybe that's what happened to him. He told me how you were shattered by the unexpectedness of her death. Oh, my poor Leo. And that I would be like a tonic, he said. Oh, how he goes on. He tried it on with me, you know, more than once. But what chance did he have when my heart was smitten by you? However, he did mention your wife in very favourable terms. Oh, Leo, I should not be talking like this, now that you are a married man. He remembers a pleasantly cool evening in midsummer, in his prenuptial days with Lil. They had come from the theatre and were seated at the bar of the Royal Dublin Hotel. A man with a leering face. What disguise did he wear? A mask of Rhesus sardonicus unsteadily wriggled into the high bar stool beside them. He gulped down a double whisky and touched Lil on the back of her exposed neck. Was it accidental? Or shoulder? He remembers expecting it to recoil, but no, it remained motionless, and she said nothing but dangled the beads on her necklace, and he could have sworn a fleeting smile crossed her lips. Had she known him? Was he from the play, he wondered? One of the cast from the Commedia dell'arte of Lolita, which they had just seen at the Peacock, and which he enjoyed, but which Lil found an awful bore. A little later he got off his high stool and falteringly, the rhymer, there's many a slip between cup and lip, touched the back of Lil's neck again near the clasp of her pendant, this time trying to make it look like an accidental brushing, as he struggled with the arms of his white linen jacket. Where did he think he was? In some hot colonial outpost, and the cool evening outside? He embarrassedly caught my eye, that bald head lurking under its fedora. Where had I seen it? Sorry, he said, and his accent seemed familiar, coming half muffled from behind the mask, and yet disguised enough to prevent me from pinpointing it exactly. I was about to take umbrage when Lil's hand went out to restrain me. Did you know him? I asked Lil afterwards. Who was he? Just a man, she said. Oh, Leo, I hope you are happy. There are so many things I want to tell you, and one thing in particular. which I don't know if I should ever tell you. Please write to me. It all depends on whether you answer this letter. Just look at it. I didn't even write in paragraphs, I was so nervous. With sincere sympathy, Bernarda. The Letters to Jude is perhaps my most experimental novel. It was 13 years in gestation, and it really is like a compendium of all my thoughts and illuminations and insights from all my reading over those years. It plays with language. It is essentially, about homo ludens, man at play, but it's also homo tragicus, of course, in the sense that, life is ultimately tragic as it is mortal for human beings. And in it, Leo, he is an ailing, middle-aged librarian. His marriage is in a rut. He's in a loveless and childless marriage, and to add to the trouble, his mother dies very young and prematurely, being struck by lightning as she's at a window. And the strange thing is that the lightning strikes her and kills her, but captures her picture in the glass frame. And this, of course, this sudden death of his mother has a profound effect on Leo. And this then is compounded by a letter he receives, because it's published in the newspapers about this strange death of his mother. And this girl, Bernarda Rodriguez, hears about it, and she had been an old flame of Leo when she was an au pair in Dublin, and she writes to commiserate with Leo on the death of his mother. But she also reveals that they, after they had a horrific night one night in the chief librarian's house, that she actually conceived a child called Juanito. So this makes Leo doubly anxious, realizing that he is the father of a son, and he's filled with longing that he'd love to meet him. And it sets off a communication between Leo and Bernarda, whom he then calls Jude, sort of gender neutral, so that his wife would not find out about their correspondence. The experimental nature, of course, of communication, like we realize the limitations of communication with just 26 letters of the English alphabet, and this becomes apparent in their correspondence, the limitations of human communication. Between Leo and his wife, there's so little communication. He feels he longs for this communication that he used to have as a child with his mother, which he took communication for granted, and nights now he lies in bed longing for a word, to hear someone talk to him. So the communication between himself and and Bernarda, or Jude, who is in Seville, takes on new forms, because it goes into telepathy. For example, when the letters break down in a revolution in the novel, there are lots of interjections in the novel, like for example, from the fictive author himself, James Francis, from a rhymer, from a stern-faced critic, from a sympathetic critic, and even from the seer of suburbia. So all these people interject, and hence the experimental nature of the novel in trying to find meaning. Leo goes out, like ancient man went out, I suppose, to bring home berries to his cave. Modern man goes out, and in the case of Leo, for illuminations, and he brings home illuminations or insights into the world. So the idea of the novel being, experimental is because modern life, I think, has so many disparate things happening at the same time. Like Joyce says man now can have two things at a time. And, whether mobile phones and modern technology, perhaps the formulaic pattern of writing is no longer adequate to encompass all the different things that go on in man's mind now. And for example, I think it was Montague said that the best and most pleasing writing is that which excites in the soul the greatest number of simultaneous sensations. So that's what I was trying to achieve with the experimental nature of this novel. Deep emotions and feelings are prerequisites, I think, of any serious novel. The early death of Leo's mother, that premature striking down by lightning and capturing her image in a pane of glass, had a profound effect on him, of course. The sense of loss. She was a woman with whom he communicated, took communication for granted. They were great talkers with one another. And when she died, he felt bereft because he's in a loveless and childless marriage where communication is not top of the agenda. And the second element, the jolting effect when he discovers that he is a father, when he discovers that the Bernarda Rodriguez, who writes to him and tells him that some years ago when they were going out one another, she worked as an au pair in the senior librarian's house, and a dreadful thing happened there. Horrific thing happened, and she went back to Spain and didn't tell Leo until now that he is actually the father of her child, Uanito. And this, of course, brings a huge longing in Leo, because he wants to try and come in contact with the child. This communication, of course, has to be hidden from Lil, that's Leo's wife, and so he gives Bernarda the neuter or the gender neutral name of Jude, and they communicate in very emotive ways with one another. There's a sense of longing, the loneliness of both of them is dealt with. And of course, the tragic element, which is the realization of the finiteness in the world, especially with Leo's learning that he has a fatal illness. And so the two are like lost souls trying to find each other. It's like someone saying that, we're all born with a twin. I think it was Plato. And that we spend our lives searching for our other half, or the twin. And that's what this communication between Leo and Jude is a bit like. The animus and the anima, trying to see the feminine in each of us and the male in each of us to make a whole, to join us together in trying to find a completion in life. And that's perhaps where the emotions and the feelings and intimacies become so strong as they explore each other's lives. Deconstruction, transgressions, to go beyond the limits set by commandments, critical analysis of literary and philosophical language. Homo ludens, man at play, that's what I was really engaged in. I was playing with language in this novel, and I was looking at the world from different angles, and in the hope of making some sort of interpretations about life and meaning and the place we as human beings have in this huge cosmos. We're really only a dot in the universe, and we are, I suppose, really guests of the universe, as Pasternak the poet says, and rather than colonizers. And of course, realizing this, it reduces man's hubris. And one thing that Leo is not, he does not suffer from hubris. And as he goes on his quotidian odysseys, seeking these illuminations. So the Homo ludens, of course, is also paralleled by Homo tragicus, of course, which is the tragic element of man. And that, of course, is captured in our very finiteness, the very realization that we're all going to die. And particularly in Leo's case, it's more acute because he actually is suffering from a fatal or from a terminal illness. The deconstruction of the novel form itself, like the omniscient writer of, say, the past, of the 19th century novel when it was in its heyday with George Eliot, Thomas Hardy, Dickens, all these writers were omniscient authors, and I don't know if that fits in nowadays with the multitasking activities of people today with all the new technology. Joyce said we all have two things at a time, and perhaps we have more than two things at a time, and so we don't always capture the various thoughts that go through modern man's or modern woman's heads. And so a lot of deconstruction took place in the novel, with for example, the formulaic novel was deconstructed in the sense that I have experimentation with streams of consciousness, with telepathy, with interjections from even the fictive author himself, who was James Francis, from the critics, the stern-faced critic, the sympathetic critic, from the seer of suburbia, and they all make their contribution to the novel and the narrative in a sort of potpourri, a sort of a mix which comes out hopefully with some sort of meaning about life, and that's basically what I was about. Religion, or rather the questioning of it, does play a part, sort of a background note to the symphony of the novel. Bernarda, the Spanish girl, is very much a traditional Orthodox Roman Catholic from Seville, and the dreadful horror of what happened to her and the conceiving of a child out of wedlock caused her to retreat deep into her own psyche, and she goes back to Seville and her parents. Leo, on the other hand, is more of a doubter, although he's very widely read. He reads all the tracts, even the people that Bernarda loves, like Santa Teresa, the mystics, Santa Teresa de Avila and San Juan de la Cruz. She's very influenced by them, and although he is the doubter, he has read all of these books as well, so they're able to communicate with each other. And tracks from different religions as well, not just one religion, and different philosophies. Perhaps the difference is marked between both Bernarda and Leo when they go to the grotto on a pilgrimage of supposedly 15 consecutive days if one's prayers are to be answered after the terrible horror that they endured. And while Bernarda is very, very diligent in doing that, Leo is remiss and breaks the 15 consecutive days. They're supposed to walk, and he goes on his bicycle, and they are all worried that the two of them are that they have broken the requested the stipulations of the pilgrimage. So religion does play a part. It's the part really is a hermeneutic part where both of them are trying to find out about life, and Bernarda or Jude more through the orthodoxy of religion than the more speculative Leo. Nature does figure a lot in my work. I'm a poet as well as a novelist, so the sort of poetry that I write is mainly lyric poetry, and that sort of writing sort of blends sometimes into the prose, so it's a type of poetic writing at times. particularly influenced by writers who I love the style of writing of, like say Virginia Woolf or Michael Ondaatje, and so as I've been described mainly as a lyric poet, and a lot of reflection goes into nature. Also, for a hermeneutic reason, for trying to find out about the world, the universe. Although I was born in the city, I have a sort of a rural heart, and I married a lady from the country, and I spend a lot of time in my cottage in the mountains of West Cork, and there I'm surrounded by nature, by trees, by birds, by clouds. Even to watch the grass grow is a miracle in itself, I think. So for me, nature is perhaps the springboard for my writing, and it also encourages a sort of meditative and contemplative disposition, which is conducive to creating. Apart from Delia's Ulysses by James Joyce, there are some books that have quite influenced me. One would, of course, be To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I remember finding it serendipitously at a book fair, and being bowled over by the prose, the wonderful poetic prose. And I felt this is what a novel should be, really, a work of art. And a prose writer writing prose is such lyrical beauty, and still able to encapsulate the essence of life in something so simple as a protracted holiday to a lighthouse. Woolf, to me, captures the longing of the small boy by means of a stream of consciousness, which, of course, is, I should have mentioned, is an experimental nature in my novel as well, of course, as in Joyce's. And such wonderful painterly and lilting prose that I just was bowled over by it. It trawls the memories of various characters under the watchful eye of the aspiring artist Lily Briscoe as she ponders the meaning of life. So, outlining her view of this novel, Woolf actually rather humbly said that she was just a sensibility, a conduit to the world, but I think to transfer those sensibilities into the novel as she did required a great deal of artistic talent and fortitude. Another novel that I found very, very, moving, and where the author was not afraid to experiment, was The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. And I have to admit, I was initially, it's usually the other way around, but I was initially drawn to it by the film, and I was having a crush on Julie Binoche. I wanted to see how the real character played out in the novel. So when I read Ondaatje, Ondaatje, like Woolf, is a poet, but then, like Woolf is a poet in his own right, whereas Virginia Woolf was poetic in her prose. And this talent also transfers so well into beautiful writing. Like Woolf, he's an artist, he uses brush strokes, painterly like, and very fond of chiaroscuro, of light and dark, which would remind you of Caravaggio. And it's funny that Caravaggio happens to be one of the characters in that novel. So I think Michael Ondaatje is one of the best writers in that genre, or if you like to call it a genre, writing today. A third novel perhaps that had quite an influence on me, well, not just one novel, but the writer himself, which was Gabriel García Márquez. And Love in the Time of Cholera was a wonderful book about memory, and how love, despite the age and aging, how it can endure, and in selfless acts and chivalry, true love still exists in a fractious world, and beautiful prose as well. And sometimes he's not afraid to take risks with reader credibility, and he succeeds as he did, particularly in the thing that really brought that book that brought him to fame initially, with the magic realism in the 1967 novel of 100 Years of Solitude. So this Colombian writer, who was a Nobel laureate, gets to the heart of true emotions in people.